Tonight, we're going to step quietly into a world that no longer exists. A world of bright colors, distant drumbeats, and stone temples that pierce the sky. It is the world of the Aztecs. In the stillness of your room, perhaps with the lights dimmed and the blankets pulled up, I invite you to let go of today's noise and drift with me, calmly and gently, into the heart of ancient Tenochtitlan, the capital of a civilization both deeply spiritual and unimaginably harsh. We'll begin in the crowded streets of the city's marketplace. Not as a tourist, not as a ruler, but as a low-born worker, whose daily struggle to survive was measured in steps, smells, and sweat. From there, we'll follow the quiet unraveling of an empire, through the eyes of its final true emperor. We'll explore the forgotten secrets hidden beneath stone temples and time-worn altars. And finally, we'll slip into the silent world of Aztec priests. Those whose lives were shaped by incense, silence, and ritual precision. There's no need to stay fully awake. If your eyes grow heavy as we travel, that's perfectly fine. History will carry on, softly, steadily, and without urgency. So now let's begin. By imagining yourself in the early hours of an ordinary day in ancient Tenochtitlan, a city rising from the middle of a vast lake. The sun hasn't fully climbed into the sky yet, but you are already on your feet, preparing for another day in the Aztec marketplace. Imagine yourself waking just before dawn, inside a modest reed and mud home pressed close against others like it. There is no bed, only mats laid across the hard-packed floor, and your breath puffs faintly in the morning chill. You are a tlayme, a porter, hauler of goods, not a merchant, not a craftsman, not a noble. Your role is simpler. You carry things, heavy things, sometimes for traders, sometimes for tribute collectors, and always for very little thanks. Today, your burden is a bundle of fish, coarse wrapped in woven cloth, still damp with lake water. It smells not badly, not rotted, but sharp, like brine with a hint of slime, and it will smell worse by midday. You hoist the load onto your back, the weight pressed against your shoulders by a leather strap looped over your forehead. This is your mekapal, and it will leave a line of soreness across your brow by nightfall. But this is normal. Pain for you is not a surprise. It is just one more rhythm in the day. As you step into the narrow alleyways of your neighborhood, the city is beginning to stir. From behind reed walls, the smoke of morning fires begins to drift upward. Tamales are being steamed. A tali, a thin corn porridge, is being stirred in clay pots. Women murmur prayers to household gods. And chickens cluck faintly from underwoven baskets. Tenochtitlan is waking. You follow the long, stone-paved causeway toward the market district. The causeway itself is alive, lined with canal bridges, guarded by watchmen, swept constantly by slaves with woven brooms. There is beauty in the symmetry. Rows of whitewashed homes, flower pots balanced on ledges, and the occasional hummingbird flitting among bright red blooms. But you do not slow to admire it. You are expected in the Tyanquistli, the great market. And if you are late, well, lateness can be punished. The market opens with the rising sun, and already it is alive with motion. Tenochtitlan's central marketplace could hold tens of thousands on a busy day. And today is a warm, clear day, which means crowds. You enter quietly, not through a main gate, but through a side path worn into the dust. Smells of sweat, of crushed fruit, of cooked maize, of old leather and dried blood. Not offensive exactly, but layered. A wall of sound rises around you, not shouting but chanting, haggling, singing. The rhythm of commerce, backed by the deep thud of a nearby temple drum, calling out the hour. There are vendors squatting behind mats, selling dried chili, woven sandals, obsidian blades, turkeys, chocolate, tobacco, and more. Others call out prices in the sing-song tones of the market. Still others whisper, moving illicitly through the crowd, offering forbidden things. Sacred mushrooms, charms, or stolen jewelry. You do not speak. You simply move forward, navigating the crowd with your bundle of fish. You pass Paktika, the long-distance traders in elegant cloaks, and give them space. You pass judges seated at stone benches, watching for theft or disorder. Their eyes are sharp. Their punishments are swift. A man was once caught selling watered-down honey here. His head was shaved in shame, and he was paraded through the market, spat on by his peers. That was mild. Others who steal or cheat can face beatings, exile, or worse. You unload your burden at a fishmonger's stall. The merchant barely glances at you. Your task is expected. He hands you 2 small cacao beans as payment. You accept them with a nod. In the empire of the Aztecs, cacao is not just food. It is currency. You tuck them into a pouch at your belt and move on. There is more to carry. A load of obsidian blades next. Then baskets of maize. Then a stone idol, heavy and cold. By noon, the heat settles over the city like a soft blanket. It is not sharp, but it is unrelenting. You smell sweat. Your tunic clings to your back. Your neck aches from the strap. Still the market buzzes on. You pass a crowd gathered near a wooden platform. Something is happening. You glance without stopping. It is a public punishment. A man caught stealing jewelry. Lashes raised. You do not watch. Not because it disturbs you, but because you cannot afford the delay. And then, toward the afternoon, a strange moment. Silence falls. Not across the entire marketplace, but in waves. People pause. Some bow their heads. Others kneel. A priest is passing by, robed in red, carrying a small censer that wafts with copal smoke. Behind him walks a man in pristine white. His face painted, his chest bare. Sacrifice is scheduled today. Not in the market, but nearby, at the Templo Mayor. And the chosen victim is being paraded. You look away as do most. Not in fear but in respect. Or perhaps superstition. You do not speak his name. You do not meet his eyes. You continue hauling. By evening your day is ending. You have earned a few more cacao beans. Enough to buy maize. A bit of chili. Perhaps even a smoked frog if you're lucky. You return home slowly, muscles tired, feet swollen. Tomorrow will be the same. Another day in the Aztec marketplace. Always moving. Always watch. Always working. And yet, still alive. Still part of the rhythm. The rhythm of a civilization held together by trade, by tribute, and by toil. Now let's leave the dusty, crowded lanes of the market behind. Let the noise fade. Let the smell of fish and chili and damp stone slip away. And instead, walk with me into the cool, shaded corridors of a palace. One of the largest ever built in Mesoamerica. It is made of gleaming stone and painted with rich reds and blues. Its walls are adorned with images of hummingbirds, serpents, and stars. Within it, everything is quieter, slower, measured, and somewhere inside, behind rows of guards and past kneeling courtiers, is a man sitting cross-legged on a mat of woven rushes. He is tall for his time, elegant, impeccably groomed. He is Montezuma II, Montezuma II, Emperor of the Aztecs, chosen by the gods, feared by his subjects, and slowly, silently, unraveling. Montezuma was not born a king. He was a noble, trained as a priest and general, well-versed in ritual and war. And when he rose to power in 1502, he inherited an empire swollen with tribute. His realm stretched from the Gulf of Mexico to the Pacific Ocean. His capital, Tenochtitlan, was a jewel of canals and temples, more vast than most European cities at the time. But Montezuma was different, more cautious than his predecessors, more anxious, more inward-facing. And while he ruled with firm authority, sending armies to crush rebellions, collecting vast stores of gold and cacao, he was also haunted by prophecy, by fate, by signs. The Aztecs believed in cycles. Time was not a straight path but a wheel, and each age ended in destruction. They feared that the fifth sun, their current era, was nearing its close. The omens, they whispered, had begun. Comets streaked the sky. Flames rose from the temple without cause. Lightning struck the royal storehouse, and in the 10th year of Montezuma's reign, strangers landed on the coast. Pale men with beards and iron weapons, atop animals the Aztecs had never seen. They came not in swarms, but in scattered ships. Montezuma heard the reports and grew still. He ordered his astrologers to read the stars again. He consulted old codices and sought answers from the gods. He did not act immediately. He did not send an army. Instead, he sent gifts, gold, feathers, cloaks of the finest weave, and a message of cautious welcome. To some this was wisdom, to others it was fear. In the quiet of his palace, Montezuma grew more withdrawn. He walked alone at night. He fasted. He prayed in private chambers, his face to the earth. He sought dreams and visions. And still the strangers came closer. Led by Hernán Cortés, they marched inland, through mountains, across rivers, forging alliances with tribes that had long suffered under Aztec rule. When at last they arrived in Tenochtitlan, Montezuma received them in full ceremony. He wore a turquoise diadem. His robe shimmered with gold thread. He walked in silence, his head bowed. To the Aztecs, he remained divine. To the Spaniards, he appeared almost submissive. He brought them into his palace. He offered them quarters. He treated them as gods, or perhaps as something more dangerous, omens in flesh. But in doing so, he allowed them too close, too deep into the heart of the empire. Soon he was a prisoner within his own home. The Spaniards controlled the palace. They dictated his speech. They monitored his guards. And still Montezuma did not raise a sword. He believed, perhaps truly, that this was the will of the gods. That destiny was unfolding. That he was not meant to stop it. Outside the walls, his people grew restless. Whispers turned to anger. Stone throwers gathered at the edges of the square. Cries for rebellion echoed through the streets. And then came the final insult. The Spaniards, fearing revolt, ordered Montezuma to calm the people. He stood upon the balcony of the palace, dressed in his finest robes, and spoke to them in his soft priestly voice. But they did not listen. They hurled stones. They cursed his name. They saw no God in him now, only weakness. One of the stones struck him in the temple. Whether that wound killed him, or whether the Spaniards ended his life later, quietly and without ceremony, no one knows for certain. What is known is this: Montezuma II died not as a god, but as a man broken by prophecy, trapped between worlds, swallowed by silence. After his death, chaos followed. The empire collapsed within a year. The temples were looted. The marketplaces fell silent. And the great lake that surrounded the city was drained and turned to dust. Today Montezuma's name lives on. But not his voice, not his mind, not the quiet, solemn thoughts of a ruler who saw the end coming, and could do nothing to stop it. The rhythm of his reign was not war or triumph, but waiting, watching, and finally falling. Now let us step away from emperors and markets. Leave behind the noise of human voices. Let the sound of sandals on stone fade into memory. We walk now toward a different place. Place of ritual, of silence, of mystery. It is called the Templo Mayor, the Great Temple, once the spiritual heart of Tenochtitlan. You would have seen it rising from the center of the city like a great mountain of stone. Twin staircases leading upward. 2 shrines at the summit, one dedicated to Tlaloc, the rain god, the other to Huitzilopochtli, the sun and war god. Together they governed life and death, drought and harvest, day and night. But the temple you see today is not what once was. Much of it lies buried, hidden beneath centuries of soil, stone, and colonial construction. And so tonight we dig, gently, quietly, carefully, not with tools in hand but with the steady precision of thought, of knowledge, of memory preserved in bones and clay. The rediscovery of the Templo Mayor began in the 20th century, when a massive circular stone, carved with the image of the goddess Coilzaqui, was unearthed beneath modern Mexico City. It was a sign. And soon, archaeologists began peeling back the layers of time. What they found beneath the colonial cathedral and cobbled streets was not a single temple, but seven distinct phases of construction. Each new ruler built upon the last, raising the temple higher, grander, more elaborate, layer upon layer of devotion. And within these layers they found secrets, offerings, carefully placed in cavities deep within the temple's heart. Tiny figurines, jade masks, coral beads brought from distant coasts, exotic feathers, carefully preserved in clay-lined vessels, even shark jaws, crocodile bones, and the remains of eagles and jaguars, arranged with almost meditative precision. These were not random. Each offering had meaning. Each object was a message to the gods. The deeper they dug, the stranger the discoveries became. A massive cache was found beneath a shrine platform. Hundreds of objects placed in symbolic layers. There were butterfly pendants, signifying transformation. Rows of sea creatures, placed hundreds of miles from the ocean. And bundles of incense burners, blackened from long ago fire. But perhaps the most haunting discoveries were the skull racks, or tzompantli, once visible above ground, now found in fragments below. They tell the story not only of ritual, but of renewal through sacrifice. To the Aztecs, these offerings were not morbid. They were essential. Blood, bones, rare shells. These were food for the gods, the price of balance in a fragile world. One offering cache contained the bones of children, some as young as 3 or 4, placed carefully, with beads in their mouths, and signs of careful ceremonial preparation. The archaeologists who uncovered them worked in silence, not out of fear, but reverence. The Templo Mayor is more than a ruin. It is a palimpsest, a place written and rewritten over centuries. Every new ruler added to it. Every sacrifice changed it. And even in destruction, it was never fully lost. When the Spaniards came, they tore it down. Stone by stone, block by block, they built churches atop it. They erased it from maps. But they could not erase it from the earth. And now, as the modern city bustles above, the temple sleeps quietly below, guarded by glass and dim lights, studied by careful hands, whispered about in university halls. The secrets beneath the Templo Mayor are not just relics. They are echoes of a people who believed the gods lived among them, who saw the divine in feathers, in fire, in blood, and who built a mountain, not of earth but of meaning. So when you lie in bed tonight, consider this. Beneath your feet, wherever you are, there may be layers of lives, layers of belief, layers of sacrifice. History does not disappear, only waits, quietly, beneath. Let us ascend once more. But not toward the noise of the marketplace, nor the throne room, nor even the archaeologist's trowel. Instead, we climb toward the hush of devotion, toward the still, incense-swirled world of those who did not command armies, but who spoke softly and precisely to the gods themselves. We are entering the world of the Aztec priests. Not warriors, not rulers, not traders. They lived behind veils of smoke and silence. And yet, despite this, they held a kind of power that shaped the very structure of Aztec life. Imagine the early morning, still wrapped in the blue shadows of dawn. A high priest rises not from a bed, but from a woven mat, having slept little. His body is thin from fasting. His hair long and matted, stiff with dried blood from ritual cuts. His robe is dark, embroidered with tiny feathers, some dull, others shimmering like moonlit stone. He begins his day in silence. There is no greeting, only a small bowl of water poured over his hands. Then incense is lit, copal, a sacred tree resin, and the smoke curls upward in ribbons like vines seeking the sky. He moves slowly, deliberately. Every motion of a priest is a ritual. Every breath has purpose. To serve the gods, one must live apart from ordinary rhythms. Priests are trained from youth, often selected as children for their calm temperament, their quiet gaze, their ability to hold long moments of stillness without complaint. Their education is intense. They memorize prayers that must be recited with absolute precision. They learn the sacred calendar, with its complex interplay of solar and ritual days. They master the meanings of symbols, the preparation of offerings, the timing of festivals. And, crucially, they learn to endure. The path of an Aztec priest is not gentle. They fast for days, sometimes weeks. They bleed themselves, from earlobes, tongues, and thighs. Not in spectacle but in solitude, to purify the spirit, to sharpen their presence before the gods. At the great temple, they perform rituals unseen by the masses. Inside shadowed rooms, cooled by thick stone walls, they prepare offerings in quiet. Flower placed just so. A feather aligned with perfect symmetry. A chant whispered at the exact stroke of a ceremonial hour. Nothing is rushed. There is no improvisation. It is said that even their breathing was trained to align with sacred rhythms. Some priests walk the city in long processions, their skin painted black, carrying bundles of burning herbs. Others remain entirely within the temple compound, living lives of strict routine and silence, interacting only with other priests. They are not permitted indulgence. No luxury, no warmth, no casual conversation. And yet, they are honored. When a priest walks the street, people avert their eyes, not out of fear but reverence. For they carry burdens heavier than stone. They speak for the people to the gods. They mark the turning of seasons. They stand at the edge of death and life, and guide the rituals that hold the world in balance. To falter is unthinkable. To mispronounce a sacred word, to stumble during an offering, these are not simple mistakes. They are threats to the divine order. It is said that some priests wept in private, not out of grief, but because they feared they had failed to be perfect in their role. And though they lived within walls, they were never idle. Every major festival, of which there were many, required days of preparation. Feasts for the sun god, ceremonies for the maize spirits, night vigils for the moon. Each required different foods, masks, chants, and movements. And always there was blood, not violence, but release. Blood was understood as a gift, not a horror. The gods had given their blood to create the world. And now humans returned it drop by drop to keep that world turning. A priest's life was one of constant offering, of hunger, of sleep sacrificed, of comfort abandoned. But it was also a life of connection. They lived closer to the gods than anyone else, closer to mystery, to meaning. And when their lives ended, they were not buried like common folk. They were wrapped in white cotton, their bodies painted in red ochre, and placed with tools of ritual. Because even in death, their purpose continued. They were remembered not as men, but as conduits, bridges between flesh and spirit. So now, as our journey draws near its end, think of these men, not with fear, but with respect, not for what they did with blades or words, but for how they gave up the world to serve something greater, quietly, faithfully, until the very end. And now, the candles are low, the drums have faded, the markets are empty, the temples are quiet once more. We have walked together through the winding streets of ancient Tenochtitlan, past the traders and punishments, the rituals and prayers, the towering temples and silent corridors. You've carried the burdens of a fish porter, watched the downfall of a god king, brushed the dust from sacred offerings buried deep beneath the earth, and sat in the soft, unwavering stillness of the priests who once held an empire's soul in their hands. The Aztecs lived in rhythms, of sun and shadow, of feast and fast, of balance and renewal. And as you lie now in the safety of your own time, far from the heat and stone of that vanished world, you may feel a rhythm of your own beginning to slow, the breath softening, the mind loosening its grip on the present, the edges of thought beginning to blur. Let them. Let the sounds of this distant past drift away like smoke, not hurried, not forgotten, but gently set aside, because the story will remain. History, like memory, never vanishes completely. Waits, in books, in ruins. And in quiet moments like this, when imagination becomes a bridge across centuries. So sleep now if you haven't already. Rest, knowing that the world you visited tonight, with all its mystery and hardship and devotion, was once real. And for a little while, you were part of it. Good night. Wherever you are, however your day unfolded, you're here now. This is your moment to rest, to breathe slowly, and to travel quietly into the past. Tonight, we'll slip behind the shimmering curtains of a palace you've likely seen in paintings and dreams. The Palace of Versailles, radiant, golden, and sprawling. But what you may not know is that, for many, Versailles was not a place of ease and luxury. It was a machine, maze, stage. And for those who worked behind its velvet doors, the ones who carried chamber pots, polished silver, and scrubbed away the evidence of aristocratic splendor, it could be a cold and exhausting place. We'll begin in the hidden stairwells and low ceilings of servant quarters. Then visit the quiet loneliness of a queen who became a symbol. Next, we'll wander through a mystery that rattled even the Sun King. And finally, we'll sit among the powdered nobles who lived lives bound by ribbons, rules, and ritual. As always, this journey will be soft. There's no rush, no pressure. You can simply listen, drift, and let the weight of history carry you into sleep. Oh, close your eyes if you like, and let's begin. Imagine waking before the sun, not at dawn, but in the deep blue quiet of 3 a.m. Outside, the vast gardens of Versailles are still cloaked in darkness. The gravel paths that will soon crunch under the feet of courtiers are silent, cold, and wet with dew. Inside the palace walls, a different kind of stillness reigns. But in the servants' quarters, tucked far from the gilded chambers of the nobility, sleep is already over. You rise from your narrow bed, a simple wooden frame, no canopy, no silk. If you're lucky, the straw mattress isn't too damp, and the blanket hasn't been borrowed by someone else during the night. There's no time to sit or stretch. You've been assigned to kitchen duty, and the ovens must be lit before the noblemen begin to stir. Down the staircase you go, quietly, because your footsteps are not supposed to echo in the king's house. You carry your skirts to avoid tripping because the staircases, unlike those used by the royal family, are steep, narrow, and stone-cold to the touch. The scullery is where you begin. It's dark, low-ceilinged, and already smells faintly of yesterday's meat. The coals must be stirred back to life. Pots must be wiped. Buckets must be filled. There is never enough water and never enough time. Your hands are chapped from the lime soap. The nails ache from scrubbing copper with vinegar. But you do not complain. You cannot complain. Above you, hundreds of nobles and their attendants are still asleep, nestled in brocade and velvet. You, however, are cleaning silver spoons you will never use, polishing porcelain cups you must never chip, and preparing trays for breakfasts that you will never taste. Some servants were lucky enough to serve directly in the royal chambers. They were often chosen not for their skill, but for their discretion, their silence, their invisibility. In Versailles, the act of not being noticed was often the highest praise. If you're assigned to chamber duties, your task might be to carry the king's slippers, or remove the night soil bucket from under a perfumed commode. And always, always you bow your head. Even speaking without permission could result in reassignment, or dismissal, or worse, exposure to scandal, whispers, or ridicule. There are fleas, not just in the stables or hay, but in the very bedclothes of nobles. Despite the lace and powder, the perfume and pomade, hygiene is elusive here. And it is often the servant's job to notice without reacting, to clean without question, to smell without flinching. Gossip floats through the corridors like candle smoke, light, flickering, and dangerous if caught. You learn to listen without listening. You hear of duchesses' secret affairs, or which valet is out of favor, but you do not speak of them, not out loud. And when the bells ring, as they often do, you run, sometimes to fetch warm water, sometimes to gather ribbons, sometimes to explain why a wig was not powdered in time. At midday, if there is a moment, you might eat in a hallway or a small room with other servants. The food is plain. Heel of bread, some broth. If it's winter, the broth is cold by the time you finish your task. And still the day continues. There is linen to wash, wood to carry, fireplaces to sweep, or dog hair to remove from velvet chairs. You walk constantly. The palace is enormous. Over 700 rooms with endless halls and secret doors. Some servants walked over 10 miles per day, just within the walls of Versailles. At night you do not retire. You disappear. You return to your narrow room where the mattress is still damp and the blanket, if still there, carries the smell of fire and soap. And in that quiet, before your aching legs surrender to sleep, you think about the flickering chandeliers, the laughter above, the music drifting faintly from golden doors. Versailles is a palace, but for you it is a world made of steps and silence, of secrets and service, of beauty you maintain but do not share. And tomorrow the bells will ring again. Now, drift away from the servants' hidden corridors and endless errands. Let your mind float upward toward the light, up the marble staircases, past portraits in gold frames, and into the silken hush of a queen's private world. This is the realm of Marie Antoinette. You may know her name. You may remember the portraits, powdered hair, wide panniers, and delicate lace fans. But what you may not know is how quiet her world could be, how carefully composed, and how deeply lonely. She arrived at Versailles at just 14 years old, a bride not of love but of politics, an Austrian princess given to France to secure peace between two ancient powers. Imagine yourself, barely more than a child, riding through thick forests and strange cities to meet a husband you have never known. Imagine standing still for hours while your Austrian gown is stripped away at the border, and replaced piece by piece, with French silk, French lace, and French rules. From that moment on, she belonged to Versailles, to its ceremonies, to its gazes, to its expectations. Her mornings began with ritual, not reflection. She did not wake in solitude. Instead, her rising was witnessed. Attendants gathered in a cold chamber to dress her, not in private but as part of a formal, staged process. Even the act of handing her a sleeve or petticoat followed strict protocol, and all the while she smiled. She performed. But there were corners of her life where the noise softened, where the queen tried to reclaim silence. She often escaped to her private hamlet, a cluster of small rustic cottages built on the palace grounds. It was called the Hameau de la Reine. There she dressed as a milkmaid, walked among sheep, and pretended gently to be ordinary. Some mocked her for it. They said she played at poverty, that she indulged in false simplicity while her people starved. But perhaps it was the only place she felt unobserved. The only place where she could hear her own breath, smell the lavender, touch the soil. She loved music, and roses, and the sound of trickling water in the gardens. She wrote letters, many to her family in Austria. In them she sounded distant, careful, and often sad. She was not a scholar of politics, but she was not stupid. She knew the court whispered. She knew she had become a symbol, both adored and despised. And though she dined on gold-rimmed china and wore silk from Lyon, there were nights when the candles burned low, and she sat alone, listening to the wind rustle against the thick velvet drapes. The walls of Versailles were thick, but the echoes of unrest found their way in. Her world was narrowing. The queen who once danced and giggled beneath chandeliers now spent long hours in private. Even her children were a kind of performance, watched over by attendants, judged for how they stood, how they smiled. When the revolution came, the queen did not cry out. She wrote. She wrapped her children in cloaks. She stood beside her husband. She waited for what would come. But before all that, before the crowds, the prison, the final carriage ride, there were the gardens, the quiet mornings at her hamlet, the scent of fresh bread baked in a stone oven, the distant laughter of servants playing at simplicity, and perhaps, for just a few moments, she found peace. Marie Antoinette was not a villain, nor a heroine. She was a woman in a cage of mirrors, one she tried gently to repaint. And in the still corners of Versailles, her steps still linger. Imagine a prison. Not the loud, crowded kind you may picture, but a fortress, cold, remote, built into rock, a place where even the sea feels like a wall. This is the Bastille. This is the fortress of Pignerol. This is Sainte Marguerite Island. And this is where a man lived and died without a name. He was called many things over the years. The unknown prisoner, the masked one, the man in the iron mask. He was held in complete secrecy, always under watch, always veiled. His face was never to be seen. Even his guards were forbidden to speak his name. And his mask, whether it was truly iron or velvet or leather reinforced with metal, was never removed in the presence of others. He arrived sometime in the 1660s, during the reign of Louis XIV, the Sun King. And from the moment of his imprisonment, the questions began. Who was he? Why was he hidden? Why was his identity a threat? Let's walk slowly through what we do know. He was held under the supervision of a jailer named Benign d'Auvergne de Saint-Mars, a man known for his loyalty, his silence, and his discretion. Wherever Saint-Mars was appointed, the masked man was sent too. From Pignerol to Exils, then to Sainte Marguerite, and finally to the Bastille in Paris. That kind of transfer was rare. Most prisoners did not travel, especially not with their jailer. But this man was different. He was treated with strange dignity. His quarters were often better than others. He received food, books, clean linen. Yet he was watched closely, always. What could he have known? Or who could he have been? Over the years, theories multiplied. Some believed he was a disgraced nobleman. Others said he was a general, or a valet, or even a twin brother of the king himself. Voltaire, the philosopher, claimed the man was the king's older sibling, hidden from the world to preserve Louis XVI's throne. Alexander Dumas later turned the legend into fiction. A twin, a mask, a royal conspiracy. But the truth, it never surfaced. Not clearly, not certainly. The real man, whoever he was, died in the Bastille in 1703. His grave marker read only, Marchioli. No first name, no family, no history. Some records hint that he was an Italian named Ercole Antonio Mattioli, a diplomat who betrayed France. Others say this was a cover story, a placeholder for a secret too dangerous to name. Why such secrecy? What harm could come from revealing a man's face? Perhaps he resembled someone he should not. Perhaps he knew something that could unravel power. Perhaps he had simply been forgotten, and the mask had become more important than the man. The Bastille held many like him. Men lost to politics, to whispers, to silence, but none with quite so many myths. None who lived for decades with their identity caged behind metal and memory. As we walk the quiet halls of his many prisons, we hear little. The clink of keys, the scratch of a quill, the low breath of a man who cannot be seen. He read, he paced, he slept. Did he remember his name? Did he repeat it silently to himself, so as not to forget? Or did he become the mask, and nothing more? Sometimes history leaves us with facts. Other times it leaves us with shadows. The man in the iron mask. Was he prisoner or protector? Victim or threat? We will never know for certain. But what lingers is not his face. It is the silence. A long, echoing silence that still drifts through the halls of old fortresses. And through the pages of history. The sun rises slowly over Versailles, gilding the rooftops in gold, scattering light across mirror-paneled halls. A new day begins, not with labor, not with solitude, but with ceremony. For the nobles of Louis XVI's court, life was a performance. Not in the theatrical sense, though there were plenty of plays. But in every breath, gesture, and glance, there were rules and rituals and eyes. You are one of them now, a marquis or marquise. You've risen early, not to toil but to be seen. Even in sleep, your hair has been wrapped carefully, your skin scented with violet water. Your valet or maid helps you into layers of clothing, not for comfort but for correctness. Stiff brocade, powdered wigs, delicate gloves. Every fold, every ribbon is a signal, a whisper of rank, favor, or fashion. As a noble at Versailles, your day is shaped by protocol. Your first concern, appearing at the royal lever, the ceremonial waking of the king. It's not enough to be present. You must be positioned, standing at the right distance, speaking only when acknowledged, smiling at the correct moment. Proximity means everything. The closer you are to the king, the more power you appear to have. But it's a delicate game. Too much ambition, and you might be mocked or shunned. After the lever, there is breakfast. Not always for eating, often just for display. A walk through the gardens. A conversation beneath gilded ceilings. Quiet negotiation over cards. There is always someone watching. Always someone talking. Versailles is not just a palace, it is a theater. And you are both actor and audience. To keep your place, you must follow endless rules. How to bow, when to speak, where to stand, which fan gesture means flirtation, and which one means disdain. A glance can elevate you, a poorly chosen word can exile you. And so, nobles become masters of appearances. They speak in code, elegant, empty phrases filled with hidden meaning. They laugh softly at stories they've heard 100 times. They applaud music they may not enjoy, because to frown is dangerous. They do not sweat. They do not raise their voices. They do not run even if late. Behind closed doors, of course, they may sigh. They may loosen a corset, remove a shoe, weep quietly, or scratch at the heavy makeup that stings their skin. But in public, they are symbols, powdered, polished, poised. Afternoons are often spent at leisure, though leisure, too, is structured. There are games. There are concerts. There are salons, gatherings where words are chosen as carefully as jewels. Even a walk through the Hall of Mirrors is a political act. Who walks beside you? Who greets you with a nod? Who pretends not to see you? And when night falls, the performance continues. The king may host a ball, or a masquerade, or an elaborate dinner with endless courses, each served with flourishes by liveried staff. The tables are heavy with silver, the air thick with perfume and candle smoke. Laughter echoes through the grand halls. But listen closely, and you'll sense the strain beneath it. Because Versailles was not just beautiful, it was exhausting. To be noble here was to be watched constantly. To be both privileged and imprisoned. Your wealth bought silk and sugar, but not freedom. Imagine living your life surrounded by mirrors, not just on the walls but in the faces of others. Every word you say, every gesture you make, reflected, remembered. And yet, for many, this was the pinnacle of existence. To be seen at Versailles was to exist. To be excluded was to vanish. So they powdered their skin until it cracked. They danced until dawn, even when their feet blistered. They smiled and bowed and whispered. And in the quiet moments, when the music stopped, when the candles flickered out, they wondered who they were beneath the layers. Not a marquis, not a duchess, just a person, wearing gold, in a palace where golden chains felt lighter than they truly were. And now, as the last candles flicker out in the mirrored halls of Versailles, as the clatter of silver trays and whispered gossip fade into silence, you are left not with the noise of history, but with its quiet heartbeat. You have walked among servants whose lives were lived in shadow, beneath the gold, behind the doors, beneath the stairs. You've sat with a queen in her private garden, far from the jewels and crowds, listening to the wind move gently through the rose hedges. You've stood beside a man whose face the world was never allowed to see, a name swallowed by silence and secrecy. And you've worn the powdered mask of nobility, smiling gracefully while the weight of ritual pressed against your shoulders like a too-tight collar. Versailles was not just a palace. It was a system, machine. Each person, servant or sovereign, prisoner or prince, a moving part in something far grander than themselves. And now here you are, in the comfort of your own time. Not waking at 3 a.m. to scrub copper. Not bound by court etiquette or invisible chains of gossip. Just here, breathing gently, wrapped in softness, listening to history's lullaby. The echoes of the past have quieted. The grand halls are empty now, their steps faded to stillness. The masked man sleeps, at last undisturbed. The queen's garden rests beneath morning dew. And the servants, forgotten by time, no longer rush to the bells. There's nothing left to do tonight. No protocols to follow. No fires to stoke. Only the gentle rhythm of your breath. The hush between thoughts. The soft falling away. Time. Sleep now. And let the past drift quietly into dream.